all have one common problem, and that's sales. There are some startups that are okay in sales. They're doing, maybe a couple million, but they should be doing at least 10 million in the same market. Then we have startups that are catastrophic in sales, typically tech founders or founders who've never done sales before. Why is this the case? Not because they're not smart, they don't have the experience. What we try to do is we try to bring many years of sales expertise into the startups, help them redefine and refocus the strategy so that they're running in the right direction, define the KPIs, define the sales process. Are we using the phone? Are we using LinkedIn? Are we using emails? How do you bring all of these things that need to work out together so that sales works for them?
Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About Tech. It's my great pleasure to introduce you today to a famous investor and serial entrepreneur, Benjamin Ruschin. Welcome, Benjamin.
Hi, Bertolt. Thanks for inviting me.
It's great having you. You're such an inspiring entrepreneur. Yet, you're all over the place here in Austria, and I've seen you on many travels, and I know how engaged you are. But as usual in our show here, we start with a background story. The stories you might have never told in public. What is your background? How did you become an entrepreneur? How did you end up as an investor?
Thanks for inviting me. Background story. So I grew up in Munich. My grandparents were entrepreneurs, and I always kind of looked up to them. They were old school entrepreneurs, so nothing to do with what we're talking about today. But I learned a lot from them. And I tried working for corporates a couple of times. I did some internships at banks, but I realized very quickly that that's not my destiny. So my goal was always to have my first company at the age of 25. And just before I turned 25, I founded my GmbH in Austria. It didn't do anything, but it was there. And then I founded a software development company with a friend of mine, which then turned into WeAreDevelopers, scale up with HR focus.
WeAreDevelopers is this massive conference where you have thousands of people attending, and I've seen you have roughly around 9 million in revenues. So this has become a powerhouse for developers. What is the business model behind it? Is it just a conference, or is there more to it?
So the business model is we have a job board, an online platform that employers use to hire software developers, and for specialist target groups such as software developers, mathematicians, chemists, whatever, physicists, you can't use generic methods of hiring. So what we did is we built a community that software developers really love. We started hosting events, online events, live events. We have a big conference with 15,000 people once per year in Berlin. So we rent 40,000 square meters of space, and we have automotive tech companies from all over the world. And it's become the world's biggest conference for software developers. And the reason we did this, we wanted to build a community that developers really love, because we realized if we get developers to really love who we are, love what we do, and get very engaged in our community, then we have the target group that we can ultimately monetize on the other side when it comes to employers. So employers pay an annual subscription fee and have access to a software developer community, which gets job offers. We do automated matching depending on skills and other variables. And the community marketing kind of thing that we do once a year is this very big event.
But I always say the economics of success are based on doing something right. And you seem to also provide those developers the right jobs, right? You get them access to the coolest companies and get them into places where they love to work, right?
Yeah, it's a two-sided market. And we started with the developers, and then we went on to the employers. And we had some years of community building experience previously before we started WeAreDevelopers. So we did this for other target groups. These communities still exist today. But WeAreDevelopers was kind of like the icing on the cake, where we sought to really build something very big.
So building this from ground up, you really learned how to build your organizational structure, right? Your team. And I know you're a natural seller, right? Did this always work for you, or did you learn and educate yourself and improve in selling, right?
So I used to be a very introverted person. I was not good at selling. I didn't like to speak in public. And in my very first job, I worked for an Austrian startup. I think that was 2009, 2010. And I was the assistant of the startup CEO. And he sent me to the Münchner Medientage, a big media conference in Munich. And my goal there was to get the business cards of media company CEOs. And when I went to this conference, I decided that I have to flip the switch from introverted to extroverted. There's no way around it. And I basically learned on the job how to do sales. And what I learned from the very beginning was how to do top-down sales. So it was always easier for me to sell by getting in touch with the C-level and then delegating it to whoever is the decision maker in the organization. What I never learned from the beginning, at least, was how to go directly to the specialist department and work with the regular employees and not with the C-level.
Well, in times before LinkedIn, it was extremely difficult to find out who in the organization is actually the right person to talk to. This became a little bit easier. Yeah. Now, you're a specialist in sales and go-to-market, right? And with all the different initiatives that you have with your personal holding, where you're business angel, you have your founders in Europe, conglomerate with some partners together, and the biggest play is the Big Cheese Ventures Business Development Accelerator, if I frame that right.
Yeah.
What is your offering, or what how does this fit to each other? I mean, your day must have 48 hours.
So. With Big Cheese Ventures, we started to support companies with seller-side M&A and capital raising, advising them on how to structure the process and how to get the results done. Then the whole crisis started: inflation, interest rates, Russia, etc. So it became very, very difficult for startups, or even those supporting the startups, to raise capital and kind of hit the target set. So what we also realized in doing so, in working with the startups, is that they all have one common problem, and that's sales. There are some startups that are okay in sales. They're doing maybe a couple million, but they should be doing at least 10 million in the same market. Why are they not achieving their goals? They're not using the telephone. They're not, they don't have the quantity of outreaches. They don't have the quality. They haven't defined their target group. So the usual mistakes made in sales. Then we have startups that are catastrophic in sales, like typically tech founders or founders who've never done sales before. Why is this the case? Not because they're not smart or because they, don't want to do sales, but they don't have the experience. If you do something for the first time, it's always a bit of a struggle, and it's a trial and error process. And what we try to do is we try to bring, many years of sales expertise into the startups, help them redefine and refocus the strategy so that they're running in the right direction, define the KPIs, define the sales process. Are we using the phone? Are we using LinkedIn? Are we using emails? Are we attending trade fairs? Is it a combination of all of the above? How do you set up a CRM? How do you bring all of these things that need to work out together so that sales works for them? And then we actually operationally do sales for them. So we provide them with a team. This comprises lead generation, sales supervision, but also outbound sales. And we actually help them to achieve sales results in order to gain traction.
And you then invest in the best companies, like the best teams that you see working with you?
We don't have investing as a business model. When we invest, it's basically out of our own pocket. But for us, working alongside the companies is a great way to do due diligence, because we actually see what happens in the company, what works well, what doesn't work well, how big is the potential, and the ones that are particularly high potential, we like to invest in.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say this is de-risking, right, for any investor, because I've just recently seen this again. Sometimes the investor actually becomes the business model of the startups rather than the clients, who should be the ones actually buying the business model. Very interesting. So now you always have this jockey and horse picture, right? You have the jockey, the team, right, the founder, and you have the horse, the current business model. How many times do those founders need to switch horses? Do they need to switch hard on their business model, or is it really fine tuning to get them on track?
We've seen the whole span. So we've seen founders who got it totally wrong. who were trying to do B2C when they should have been doing B2B. We've seen founders who were on the right track, but then one little thing wasn't working. Like when I started doing sales for WeAreDevelopers, our pricing was way too high, way over the top. Yeah. So I could have done 300 calls per day. I wouldn't have been able to sell these products. And I think that's the complexity, and that's the big challenge for all founders, getting all of these things to work right. You have to have the operational excellence in the company. Stuff needs to work. Your product needs to work. You need to have customer support. You need to have training for your sales staff in order for them to pitch your product in the right way. The pricing has to be adequate and competitive. Then you have competitors who come out with new offerings and, endanger your business model. So I think basically seeing through this whole jungle of different variables that are changing all the time and that require your attention, that's the most difficult part.
Let's pick out one little piece of your expertise. I mean, there's a lot of trade secrets that you will keep, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that will reach out to you after this podcast. But let's take out pricing. I find it extremely difficult to work out the real pricing. How would you approach finding the right price for a product?
I've seen all kinds of people talk about all kinds of methods for pricing. At the end of the day, you need to be competitive. So you need to understand what is the value that you're providing for the client, and what is the offering worth for them. So if your offering basically reduces their costs significantly, or increases their revenues, or helps them to hire faster, better, in a lower time frame, then you're providing value. And you need to. My suggestion is to talk to as many potential clients as possible and actively ask them what they would be prepared to pay.
Okay. And if you would understand a market and you say, okay, I'm saving this client on average 2,000 euros per month, would you then say the price is right at 1,800, or should you give a little bit more of a discount versus the saving? Like how much of the value can you achieve in pricing?
I think it depends. It depends on the company and on the situation.
Okay.
It also depends on whether the customer realizes how much value you are providing and whether you're able to communicate the value or the cost saving you're providing in the right way. So I don't believe in this one method for all. I think you need to listen to the market. You need to see what your competitors are doing. You need to try out stuff. You obviously need to cover your costs based on your business plan. And all of these things put together will help you find your price. But I don't believe in this one method that will give you the perfect price.
When you look at pricing, it always plays together with brand, right? We pay ridiculous prices for some luxury brands, right? While we know that the value of the fabric and everything is not as high as this price, right? How important is it for a startup to build a brand, a strong brand? How does this have an influx on pricing?
I think marketing is extremely important. It's just as important as the usability of a product. Like I use LastPass, for example. I pay €2 per month for LastPass. Why do I pay these €2? Because LastPass says, unless you pay, you can only use this product either on your phone or on your desktop. The fact that I can use it on both my phone and my desktop motivates me to pay these €2 per month, even though I know that I could get it for free in some other way. So I think usability is super important, the value you provide, and then the way you communicate it. So there are startups that are super successful with very little marketing, simply because they're very technically focused and marketing is not such a big topic there, or the target group is not marketing savvy at all. But at the end of the day, the better your brand is, the more people know you and the higher value you kind of communicate to your target group, the better.
Now, branding and personal branding in particular, right? For Austrian startup founders seems to be incredibly important. We see all those conferences literally every week. There's something happening. And quite often surprised how many Austrian startups also find time to visit international conferences, etc. How much of this activity is enough? How much is necessary? And do you think that this balance is matching at the moment, or is it a little bit out of whack?
I think the big question is: are you running your business properly? Are you selling your product? Are you generating revenues? Is the curve going upward? If you have a business that's functioning, then that's like the basis of entrepreneurship. I know a lot of founders who are all over the place. They're on all kinds of stages. They attend all kinds of events, but their business isn't functioning. Yeah, they've had a business for 5 years or even 10 years. Revenues are stagnant. They've turned into some fundraising machine. They keep getting new investors on board. We all know these stories. I think you need to find the right balance, and I think conferences, personal branding, self-promotion, it's a means to an end. And I think some people take the wrong path and they fall into this personal branding vicious cycle where they're just jumping from one stage to the next, and the result is zero. So for me, it's important if I go to a conference, I don't know, Web Summit, Slush, Bits and Pretzels, NOAA, whatever, I want to get a result out of this conference. I want to come back with 5 deals, or I want to come back with more deal flow. Yeah. I want to acquire at least 2 clients, because the conference, flying there, the hotel, the ticket, it's probably going to cost me around 5K. So if I don't come back with at least 1 client, there's no point in this. I also see a lot of founders, and it happened to me as well, who are outside all the time and they're not taking care of their team. They're not taking care of what's happening inside the organization, and they neglect this. And I think finding the right balance in the founder team, who's on the outside, who's on the inside, is that kind of the deal, that one person is outside, one person is inside. And seeing personal branding, events, marketing, and the time you invest in stuff as a means to an end, that's the most important thing.
If you would summarize the pros and cons in the Austrian startup ecosystem in comparison to the European or the worldwide ecosystem, I don't know exactly where in the rest of the world outside of Europe you're also active, but do you see here something where we can learn, where we can improve, and also some things that are hindering us from being better?
Yeah, I mean, we have this Austrian Gemütlichkeit. Yeah, traditionally Austria was surrounded by Eastern European countries, and the Austrian economy was always booming in comparison to these other economies. So we didn't have to do much. We were doing fine anyways. I think this is kind of a cultural topic that we have in Austria, and it's something that's slowly changing, but we still struggle with this over-comfortable culture also among the staff that we hire. So I think what we can learn from other cultures, or compare Vienna to Berlin, at the end of the day, it's about achieving KPIs. You need to reach KPIs. You have revenues, you have customer acquisition costs, you have average contract value. You need to be very, very focused on the KPIs rather than on all the other fluff and PR and media attention that surrounds you. I think if we get this done, then we're on the right track.
It's I think the power to be efficient, right? To bring that to a startup team, to an entrepreneurial environment. If you invest in a startup, you always have the stakeholders around them also, right? So you have to kind of move this whole mindset a little bit. And I find it incredibly difficult with this, I would say, little bit sense of jealousy when things actually go right? Then you suddenly become the boo man, right? Because then people say, "Oh, they're making so much money out of me." Is this something you have experienced yourself?
Yeah, every time I founded a company, or every time I invested in a company, I took a beating in the beginning. So when we started WeAreDevelopers, and the conference started becoming bigger and bigger, we started generating revenues. We got a lot of critique for the fact that we were making money. So we got criticized for the ticket prices. We got criticized for certain sponsors who were attending the conference, instead of being celebrated for the fact that we were making money, generating. We generated, I think, at the time when we fundraised, we were making 3.5 million revenues in the same year, and while in Berlin, everyone was clapping their hands and telling us we're on the right track and cheering us on. In Vienna, the opposite was the case. So there was a lot of jealousy. There were a lot of people who didn't like the fact that we were financially successful. And this was tough. This was really difficult. But we knew that we're on the right track, and we knew that we just have to close our ears and keep going. And I had the same thing when I started Big Cheese Ventures, a lot of critique about our business model, a lot of critique because we were loud, because we were out there, perhaps saying what we were thinking. Of course, making mistakes. Yeah, everybody makes mistakes. And now it's going quite well, and now we hear less of the critique and there's some more cheering. But I think that's a bit of an Austrian thing, the jealousy, and you need to look beyond that, and you need to focus on, rolling out a product or rolling out a service globally or internationally, and not getting stuck here in the Austrian market. And touching back on your previous question, I think that's a trap a lot of startups fall into. They start doing sales and focusing on the Austrian market rather than focusing on Austria and Germany or thinking beyond. It's a very small market. If you found a startup in Berlin, you have 90 million. 90 million population. If you found one in Austria, you have 9 million. Smaller market, lower budget. So think big and go international faster.
Right. I know that you're a very enthusiastic sports car collector. Porsche, I believe, is your brand, right? We should embrace success, is what I hear from you. Would you say that's great if your startup makes profit and the founder buys himself a Porsche?
I think everyone should do whatever they want with their money. Yeah, whether they're silently investing it in real estate or throwing it out. I think you need to. I think you need to be careful in terms of whether you communicate this. So we have a lot of founders, scale ups. Suddenly you see the stuff they're buying, how they're spending money. At the same time, they're reducing their workforce by 30 or 50%. Not a good idea to do this.
Yeah, that's a thin line.
I think if you're successful, enjoy it. Do whatever you want with your money, and try not to be too loud about it.
Yeah. So we try to embrace success, but we need to be careful in this fine line, right? To not overdo. It's very hard to fundraise when you celebrate millions that you're spending. It was actually Florian Koschert, our mutual friend, who said, if somebody is successful, let's have them buy their own Porsche, right? So I figured that's a good connection to that one. If you have missed the episode with Florian, still up on our channel. It was great having you. Looking forward to hear from your story, maybe in a year or two. I'm sure that you will build something big again, and there will be, after Big Cheese, some additional bacon coming. Let's see what we have. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe and tune in for the next episode.